Nice to meet you.
And finally, this is our captain.
Wow, I can't imagine captaining a crew at your age. Well, I'm not exactly a...
2024 is starting things off right for RPG fans, with things like Persona 3 Reload, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and more all slated to come out early in the year. Cygames is also going to be throwing their hat into the ring with Granblue Fantasy Relink. This highly anticipated action RPG has kind of gotten overlooked given how strong the competition is, but I think we might just have one of our first sleeper hits of 2024. To give context, Granblue Fantasy is one of the originators of the gacha mobile game craze. Its success since its beginning is nothing to scoff at. To broaden its audience, Cygames has been dedicated to new genres for the series, including the super fun fighting game Granblue Fantasy Versus. But even before that, they announced Relink, a major 3D action RPG. It was announced almost 8 years ago. Despite seeing it in many forms, the game is only released now. While I'm not a fan of the series in general, I kept an eye out for it. After trying the demo, I was convinced that Cygames and the various studios who had hands on it were definitely onto something special, and I just had to play the full experience. When games are made based on long-established properties, it can be really hard to onboard new people. As a comic book and Gundam fan, I can really attest to this fact. Granblue is no exception with 10 years of content to pull from. Thankfully, Relink doesn't ask you to be a fan already, but to simply sit back and enjoy the ride. The game begins seemingly with our cast of characters in the middle of an adventure going about their day. When our heroes summon their giant dragon guardian to help them in battle, they lose control and are sent crashing into a nearby island. While exploring and helping the locals, a mysterious organization appears. Without knowing who they are or what their goals are, this crew of bad guys kidnaps our friend, igniting the start of a new adventure to rescue her. I'll be the first to admit it, but the story in the game is pretty generic. I've never played the OG mobile game, but if you told me that Lyria gets kidnapped there multiple times a year, I'd probably believe it. While the story is well constructed to keep things moving forward, it doesn't do anything new. If you're looking for a massively emotional or deep thought-provoking experience, keep looking. Relink wears its tropes on its sleeve and never tries to be more than what it presents, so in a way, I kind of respect that. Another small quirk to the story is how it begins. Other RPGs have you slowly meet your cast and whatnot over time and add them to your ranks. This game, though, jumps in with the cast and crew already met and friends. It feels like you definitely missed an epilogue or something, but instead of explaining how everyone met, it simply rolls along as if you've been there since the start. For what it's worth, I kind of like this. Once again, 10 years of backstory isn't really worth retreading for old fans, and most likely newer ones will be better served keeping it brisk. Thankfully, if you are interested in the backstory of each character and how they joined the main crew, the game has you covered. Not only is there a glossary of people, places, and things, but there are side quests called Fate Episodes. These are visual novel short stories and they're narrated by the characters themselves. Sadly, they have no cutscenes.
Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't chased that light. No Lyria, no lifelink, no adventure. Man, I probably wouldn't even have set foot off of Zinkenstill. Fate's a funny thing.
These have some great details on the characters, how they met the crew, and so on. Many are pretty silly too, so it can be fun to go through them, as well as the stat boosts that they provide. It also helps explain why the unlockable characters are playable, but not on the boat at all times, since most of them are important figures in the game's universe, and not with a crew daily. If you do use them throughout the story though, the extra characters thankfully are not silent, but will actually comment on the situation, party members, and more, as if they were there the whole time. Each of these also has 2 different gameplay segments too, to mix it up a bit. But I will say, it feels like a missed opportunity to not have more dynamic storytelling here. But from what I know, this is one of the game's many callbacks to the mobile game. The reason the Fate episodes are a little disappointing isn't because of their story content, but rather because of how good this game looks as a whole from start to end. I said it before, and I'll say it again, I love really bright, colorful, visually insane games, and this is definitely in that category. Characters are beautifully realized from their artwork into the 3D space. Everyone comes alive with a ton of characters and vibrancy to their designs. From the main hero, the captain, to the hulking reaper, Vasaraga. Everyone looks awesome. Thankfully, the world too is filled with a ton of detail. The game's 2 town hubs are distinct but have a lot of personality. Fields where most of the gameplay takes place are more reserved, but everything looks sharp and colorful. But when this game wants to show off, it does it in style. The attacks and set-piece moments are some of the best in recent memory. Cutscenes and event direction isn't something I usually notice, but I can't help but praise it. The sense of scale, speed, action, and more just goes full tilt sometime, letting the player know how much effort went into making these key moments pure spectacle. Attacks too during gameplay are extremely flashy and dynamic. Every character has their own style and flair, and they really want you to feel that unabashedly. Seriously, there are so many giant colorful effects going off in this game that it's honestly a bit of a detriment to it when you get lost behind a massive wave of swirls or attacks and magical spells all getting blasted out all over the place. Nailing down the gameplay genre of Granblue Fantasy Relink is really difficult, and it's something I've seen the internet arguing about for the last few weeks now. Is it Monster Hunter, Devil May Cry, Final Fantasy, Tales, Persona, and MMO? Yes to all the above and more. It really is all of these rolled into one. If I had to pick something to give an idea of the general gameplay, I would honestly say it's more Final Fantasy VII Remake and 16 than anything else. It's first and foremost an action RPG with character action trappings surrounding it. It's got all the flashy combat that we've come to expect from games that have been worked on by the awesome people at Platinum Games. Dynamic combo systems, juggles, that sweet dodging and blocking that rewards timing, and so on. It's got all of that usual Platinum combat flair that we've come accustomed to, and, personally, love. Its basics are simple enough to come to grips with. Each character has their own attacks and abilities to use, but what surprised me most is just how different everyone is. The amount of thought and effort that went in to make these characters distinct is worth praising all day. This isn't just limited to their basic attacks, but their general archetypes differ too. Some are fast-hitting combo monsters, others are ranged beasts, mages that sling spells, and even tanks that mitigate damage. I wasn't expecting it at all. Even characters with similar archetypes felt different in their approaches. Vayne and Vasaraga are tanks, but Vayne outright mitigates damage by blocking and using abilities, while Vasaraga absorbs it and using it to power up his attacks and regenerate health. Complementing this are abilities. Everyone can equip up to 4 unique abilities ranging from offensive and defensive. Mixing and matching them as you progress is the key to victory as the game expands during your gameplay time. These are just as flashy and dynamic as the rest of the game, and it really brings the characters to life. When it all comes together, both solo or online for a quick quest, it just hits so perfectly that I can't say enough good things about it. The diversity in gameplay and just how awesome they all feel to play is exactly the kind of thing Relink should be praised for. It has way more work put into this aspect of the game than I ever expected, given how limited the expanded roster of characters is to the story. The basic enemies aren't all that much to praise. The usual palette of fodder that gets in your way but won't really pose much of a challenge, and they're not really meant to. But once a boss appears, prepare your eyes and hands for some fun, pure Platinum Games spectacle. They are easily the highlight of the game, both visually and gameplay-wise. I love it when games ask you to play it, and these moments definitely want you to be sure you know how each mechanic works. Not only that, but also how good your awareness is with a number of unique situations where all-out combat isn't the idea. The bosses are full of visual and gameplay chaos, making them the best part of the whole experience. The team that designed them really should be proud of themselves here. The game also has a number of bite-sized quests that task players with an objective and several side conditions to gain rewards. From clearing waves of enemies, defending points, bosses, and more, there's a nice little mix here with varying lengths to grind out some extra upgrade materials if you want. These are all remixed from the game's main moments, but they never actually directly rehash them aside from some basic boss versions. And better yet, this is where the online component comes into play. You and up to 3 other players can jump in for any of these quests and blast through them with any character you've unlocked. It can be done online with others, but also the AI can hold its own if you're solo. There's quite a few of these, but it's not some infinite game mode or some massively expansive secondary game. These are meant to be quick, drop in and finish within a handful of minute quests for various rewards. All of this helps upgrade your characters. Aside from experience points, you'll also get materials to upgrade and craft weapons. Each of these takes a decent amount of items to complete entirely, so grinding it out with others can really take the edge off. While not necessary for those who like to do everything and see everything, it's definitely a fun time. You also have quite a large skill tree to work through. Everyone has a huge number of stats, abilities, and passives to grab. It's linear though, so you're meant to go along and get everything eventually with no part being missable. Points for the skill tree are gained almost constantly, so checking the menu every once in a while, you're sure to be getting a few nodes or more. Beyond this, there's a number of other small collectibles and challenges to do throughout your time with the game. The game never demands that you do everything, but there's plenty of fun to be had if you're running around searching for all of the extra missables and collectibles. Perhaps it was an issue with the messaging up until release, but I don't think most realized what they were getting into. This isn't some 75-hour RPG, but rather a character action RPG hybrid. The main story took me about 20 or so hours to see credits, and that was without doing nearly everything. The game opens up into its epilogue with dozens of more hours of gameplay potential to put into it. If you go into this with the right mindset, then Relink is a perfect recommendation for those who like fast-paced and rewarding combat. While its story does nothing new and there are a few quirks here and there in places, I was really surprised and honestly relieved that this game is as good as it is. I definitely recommend Granblue Fantasy Relink if you have the time for a fun, character action RPG with a ton of beautiful set piece moments that'll really get you hyped. But that's gonna do it for this one. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this video game, this video, and more. Are you going to be picking up Granblue Fantasy Relink? Are you putting it off until you finish the other big bangers of the month like Persona and Final Fantasy? Let me know down below, and I hope you have a good day. Stay safe out there, and see you next time.